Chapter 4. Called Up. Tarvish marched out onto the open street in full body armor. The armor added another 2 inches to his height and covered him from head to toe in some of the most advanced technology a person could ask for. The armor was made up of layers of ceramic polymer plating over a Kevlar-lined energy, absorbing and distributing padding. It had a rounded, high-backed gorget. Key areas like the abdomen and elbows were given more flexibility with layered joints. His belt, all pockets and utility supplies, also held a maroon nano-weave cloth that draped down to cover the back of his legs and armored tail. This was to help show he was a psionic, as well as a tip of the hat to ancient times when court advisors and seers would wear similar garb to show their role in a king or pharaoh's court. Blue lights highlighted his armor in specific points to allow for concentrated points in the body to absorb some forms of arcane energy that might be directed at the wielder. He wore a thick silver necklace with his dog tags hanging from the end. Some traditions never did die, even in an age when such mundane means of identification weren't needed. Arisa accompanied the captain, never more than a foot or so behind him. She was armored similarly, though her armor wasn't as heavy or restricting, made up of more loosely linked layers, similar to Tarvish's armor joints. The lights in her armor were red, a personal preference that she had chosen. A deep blue cloth was clasped atop her left shoulder and hung to her right hip, wrapping its way behind her to meet its sister end under the clasp on her shoulder. Blue signified her arcane abilities. While the other branches of the military had their modern ways of identifying specific ratings, such as specific insignias for a particular job, the EDF added the cloth accents in honor of the newly discovered traditions of mages and conjurers of the past. Tarvish was right after all. The military ran on tradition. The pair approached the others. Vince and Rod both shared the same type of armor as Tarvish, though they donned moss-green cloaks that hung over their wide shoulders, and bulky harnesses which carried a surprisingly vast array of weapons, AI-controlled turrets, and other interesting weapons platforms folded over them like an extra layer of armor. Pai Li stood out from the others, wearing only a form-fitting black jumpsuit with silver plugs that ran the length of her spine, arms, and legs. She was a Nephilim pilot, and so she had no actual armor or need for a colored cloth to denote her abilities. One thing they all had in common was a stylized golden spear with 2 lightning bolts flying from the tip on their right breasts with EDF etched above and Gungnir etched below. The group came to attention, saluting Tarvish, who gave them a crisp salute in return. As we discussed earlier, this qualification check is to make sure you're both up to snuff for field action, Tarvish said as he looked over the newest additions to his team. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if you weren't qualified, but I like to be sure. I do believe Rod here has quite the excursion planned out for the 2 of you. Just remember that while this may be a simulation, everything acts the way it would in the real world. The Chief and I will be watching for unnecessary collateral damage, use of tactics, and evaluating your ability to work as a unit. The siblings nodded, Vince lifting his ST-5J and Pai Li placing a hand on her holstered pistol. Pilots rarely had the luxury of anything larger than a sidearm if they were brought down during a battle, and Nephilim pilots had little room for anything beyond a pistol while encased inside their husks. Arisa stepped forward to stand beside Tarvish. This squad, Gungnir Squad, is the best Fort Lafayette and the EDF have to offer. That should tell you where you stand when you agreed to join our ranks. These tests aren't just to see where you are in terms of ability, though. They're to help you keep your edge up. Think of them as your mental whetstone. We want you sharp, and we want you ready whenever the call comes in. Your goal today will be... The chief paused as a bright blue, glowing figure appeared in their midst. The transparent vixen wore flowing magi robes that drifted on ethereal winds that the others couldn't feel. It was A.R.T.E.M.I.S, the unit's personal AI, an offshoot from Zeus that attended to multiple facets of Gungnir's day-to-day routine in a similar way that Zeus attended to the day-to-day facets of the fort as a whole. She also helped coordinate tactics, sensors feeds, and data processing, selecting more pertinent data, and bringing it to the attention of Gungnir's members for immediate evaluation. In a way, A.R.T.E.M.I.S was as much a member of the unit as any of the others. A.R.T.E.M.I.S, to what do we owe the pleasure? Tarvish asked. The digital representation bowed its head. Sir, you have been requested to attend a meeting at the Astral Warding Center as a representative for the EDF. I am transferring the information to you now. Colonel Kochia has asked that you bring the unit with you to secure the building to give the politicians a feeling of security, and in the off chance that there is an attack. Tarvish paused as A.R.T.E.M.I.S uploaded the information to him. He nodded as his implants helped him sort through it in only a few moments. Very well, let's terminate this sim. A.R.T.E.M.I.S, wake up Mary and brief her. Make sure she's in her chamber prior to us boarding our transport. I want to keep her out of sight unless absolutely necessary. Aye, aye, Captain. The AI gave a salute, then faded from view. A heartbeat later, and the members of Gungnir Squad opened their eyes. The city was gone, and they were all sitting in reclined chairs. Tarvish was the first out of his seat, followed closely by Rob and Arisa. They were used to popping out of a simulation and no longer suffered from the disorientation that could come with it. Vince and Pai Li shook their heads clear as they stood up slowly. "All right, everyone, I want you suited up and ready to roll in 10 minutes, Tarvish barked. "We have a wisp ready to take us to the AWC. Mary is already boarding. Let's not keep her waiting." "Who's Mary?" Pai Li asked Rob, who was hustling to the door alongside her. Rob looked down at the fennec, his stripes making his grin look a bit more sinister than he had intended. "Mary's the unit's messiah." Pai Li almost stopped in her tracks, a cold chill running through her. A messiah? I was hoping I'd never meet one. Rob let Pai Li exit before him. They're hard to know, and it's always uncomfortable around them, but one thing you never have to doubt is their resolve. Messiahs seem to have this, hate for Outworlders beyond anything I've ever experienced. You'll be able to tell when we board the Wisp. Mary won't stop until Earth is free, or she's dead. The thought didn't necessarily put the young pilot at ease. Not that she had room to talk, really. She was a Nephilim pilot. She used an amalgamation of technology and sorcery to connect herself both physically and mentally to the husk of a fallen Outworlder. When she was connected, her consciousness merged with echoes of the husk's life force, melding the two beings into a quasi-symbiotic state in order for her to wield the Outworlder's abilities, whether they were arcane, psionic, or other. Pai Li's husk was a Panal-class Outworlder, a powerful creature that heralded the arrival of truly rare and destructive Outworld creatures, usually generals of an invading host. Panals were exceptionally difficult to kill, and when properly handled, they made for highly prized, controllable, living weapons. The echoing psyche of the dead Outworlder was said to whisper to the pilot, which explained the slow deterioration of the pilot's personality, but it still didn't compare to the travesty of a messiah in Pai Li's eyes. Named for their seemingly miraculous appearances, messiahs are truly unsettling beings. The public notion of a messiah was that a fetus appears in a mother through immaculate means and is a powerful psychic beacon. The child coming into existence sends out a powerful call into a second dimension and pulls a creature from it to serve as a host body. The creature appears in the physical realm using the Messiah's mother as raw materials for its form, and the Messiah lives inside the creature for the rest of its life, using the creature as a sort of living battle vehicle. The mother would know for about 3 to 4 months that she was pregnant before unceremoniously being warped and churned physically into an eldritch, nightmarish form, while the creature's journey to the physical plane was fueled, to the mother's increasing woe, by her soul being rent asunder. The truth, however, is that messiahs are not immaculately conceived. In truth, they are created through painstaking rituals that call on the power of the cosmos and to infuse a fetus with Pharos energy. The rituals were covered in the Voynich manuscript, an Italian book which was believed to have been written in the 1500s and deciphered in the early 2000s as a book on women's hygiene. However, because the manuscript's index and a few hundred pages were missing, the decryption and its purpose were mistaken. When a Gaia-centric group of females calling themselves Naigaean de Gaia managed to infiltrate the Vatican Archivi Segreti and found the missing pages and index, the Voynich manuscript was found to be an instructional manual on how to create carne degli altri, flesh of the others. The earlier portions of the manuscripts were discovered to have been a means of cleansing the female host to guarantee the success of the rituals. With the full texts and knowledge of the rituals in the manuscript, then Ken de Gaia set to work experimenting. The last part of the ritual, though, was very much in line with popular belief. The fetuses did use their mothers as surrogate flesh for their monstrous forms, and the mothers, to their terror, only realized once the change began to take place. Several agonizing seconds later, and the mother was gone, leaving only the Messiah left in her place. The first Messiahs were believed to be monsters. They were some of the first cases that the EDF was assigned to. After the EDF discovered the source of the Messiahs, the US government consolidated the members of Naigaean de Gaia into its ranks so as to weaponize the Messiahs and ensure that they were dispatched to the areas that they could be most effective. Since there are only a handful of Messiahs at any given time, they were divided among the EDF's most effective squads. Tarvish, Arisa, and Rod all arrived at the waiting Wisp at nearly the same time. Each of them was armored in the same way they had been in the simulation. Pai Li arrived a minute later, flanked by Vince, floating corpse-like in the womb of her Nephilim. The Nephilim husk was tall, almost 15 feet in height and 5 feet wide from shoulder to shoulder, with pale skin and violet, green, and blue highlights that seemed to resemble bruises up and down its form. Its head resembled a skinned jaguar topped with writhing feather-like tentacles, and deep-set, lifeless eyes that still seemed to bore into a person surrounded by jutting bone spurs. Its right arm was thin, but solid, and the long, slender claws that made up its hand seemed to be able to come together to form a spear tip. Its left arm widened to form a bone-like shield with ape-like fingers each the size of a baseball bat, reaching out from under the shield's lip. Its legs were thick and powerful, ending in talons that could dig into the strongest materials. The chest cavity had been hollowed out to fit its pilot. Piley hung seemingly lifeless in a jelly concoction of oxygen, proteins, vitamins, and a mixture of chemicals that allowed her to breathe and receive nutrients while she operated the husk. Cables and wires connected the young Fennec to her Nephilim, attached to the plugs in her jumpsuit. "Piley," Tarvish called as the Nephilim approached. "Are you fully merged with your host?" The Nephilim stopped its approach, looking down at the captain. Its deep, rasping voice echoed out, "We are operating as one, sir." Tarvish noticed that Piley's mouth mimed the words, but her voice couldn't travel well enough through the fluids in the containment shield to be heard. Instead, her voice and the Nephilim's seemed to speak at once in his head. Piley's was light and upbeat, while the Nephilim's was deep and caustic, like it was trying to overwhelm its pilot's voice. Strangely, though, the Nephilim's mouth did not move. "Excellent! I want you next to Mary's containment chamber. The rest of you can find your spots." Gungnir boarded the Wisp quickly, finding their designated slots. The trip was short, only a few minutes. It was long enough for Vince to get a look at Mary, though. Her containment chamber only allowed for a view of the fetus that made up the Messiah through a small window in the middle of the blast door that sealed Mary off from the rest of the unit. The fetus's eyes glowed blue and stared straight ahead, but Vince seemed to get the feeling that it was focusing on him the entire trip. He couldn't shake the feeling that the thing behind that door was far more interested in him than in his sister, who floated in the artificial womb of an outworlder husk. The half-breed leaned over to nudge Rod with his elbow, then motioned with a flick of his head back to Mary, whispering, "Feels like she's staring at me. Anyway, I can get that to stop." Rod laughed and grinned so wide that the strips on his cheeks seemed to merge together. "Who? Mary? Mary? Are you eyeballing the newbie? Trying to make his ass nervous or something?" The eye didn't move to show any visual acknowledgement, but Mary's voice, a queer, high-pitched mixture of melodious and malicious tones, appeared in their minds. "No, he is curious. Very strange. I can sense the power in him. Why isn't he designated to use it? Why aren't you designated to use your power?" "Don't know what you're sensing, creature, but..." Vince was quickly interrupted by a slug in the arm from Rod. "You call her that again, and I'll kick your ass from one end of this wisp to the other," the senior weapons mate growled. "Mary is a person. She's no weirder than the captain with his psionics, the chief with her magic, or your sister who's currently floating and hooked up to a dead outworlder. You got that?" Vince stiffened at the reprimand. He was very by the book and did his best to stick to rules and regulations more so than most boot camp cadets. The fact that he had crossed a line by calling Mary a creature surprised him, and he mentally reprimanded himself alongside Rod's verbal chiding. He gave a quick nod. "Yeah, Gunny. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to..." "Fuck what you meant to do, or what you didn't mean to do," Rod replied, his voice calming as he pointed at Mary. "That woman right there has saved every one of us at some point. She can't help being what she is, and she'll surprise you with how normal she can be if you just talk to her sometime." "And I will eat more than everyone here combined," Mary chimed in. The response seemed as giddy and braggadocious as a child's, but lined with some subtle layer of ill intent. Rod's mood seemed to shift at Mary's attempt at humor. He chuckled and smiled. "Damn right you will. I'm glad you eat last on Fridays because too many people would be waiting in line behind you." "You make good food," Mary seemed to titter back. Her attention zeroed in on Vince again, and she quickly returned to the question that had started the tangent on breakfast. "Why aren't you designated to use your power?" "Sorry, Mary," Vince corrected his original reply, "but I don't have any powers. Just my armaments and good tactics." "No," Mary's response was almost curt. It was certainly rigid in its uncompromising nature. "You do have power. I can sense it. It's there, just like Chief Corley's is there, waiting under the surface, coiled and ready to spring to life. How can you not know you have power?" "Because," Piley's blithesome and odious mental voice poured into the conversation. "Vince is stubborn and doesn't want to believe in something unless he can." "Cut the chatter, people," Arisa called out. "We're touching down in 15 seconds. Get prepped and put your game faces on." "Yes, Chief," the group responded in unison. "Mary, you're being held in reserve in case something happens," Arisa said as she stood and prepped for the drop to come. "If they put you on the ground, make me proud." "I will do my best, Chief," Mary replied. There was no mistaking the additional sinister intent in her reply. Mary lived for the opportunity to battle outworlders. You always do. Gungnir Squad, Tarvish barked. The lot of them came to attention, or as best they could in the case of Mary and Piley. We're here to represent the Eldritch Defense Force in Fort Lafayette. I expect professionalism at all times. Am I understood? Yes, sir, the squad replied in unison. The Wisp came to a stop in front of the AWC headquarters, hovering some 50 feet over the ground. It took a few moments for the area below them to be cleared of medical personnel and other emergency responders. When the all-clear came, the floor sections of the Wisp let loose their hold on each other, and Gungnir Squad fell from the craft, landing on the pavement below. The crowd outside the AWC almost panicked at the sight of Piley's Nephilim. It seemed as if the crowd was going to lose its composure until Tarvish activated the loudspeakers on his armor so that he could grab their attention. Ladies and gentlemales, Tarvish announced, my name is Captain Tarvish Harkessel. We are members of the Eldritch Defense Force. Please do not be alarmed at the presence of our companion. She is a Nephilim pilot and is here to better protect you. She and the rest of my unit will be available to assist you should the need arise. However, unless said need arises, I would ask that you continue what you were doing. If you have any questions, concerns, or requests, please direct them to our AI, Artemis. That is all. Tarvish tucked his helmet under his right arm, deactivated his loudspeakers, and signaled for Arisa to follow him. W.M. Hall, I'm leaving you in charge down here. I want you and Mr. Kamenev to do what you can to help. Send Piley Blueside to get her out of sight and to establish a perimeter. Rod tossed a quick salute. Sir! The large tiger began relaying the orders as Tarvish and Arisa marched up the steps to the AWC. Piley's Nephilim sped into the air while Vince jogged off to secure a perimeter.